Hi everyone, my name's Brian Kelly, and I'm here to talk about awareness training for emergency seclusion and emergency restraint. It's a very difficult topic to talk about. I know we were talking about it this week in class, but it's something in my district we spend a lot of time on, and something I've helped with, and feel like sharing some of my experience. So here we go. So, who should be trained and why should people be trained? So, what's the rationale behind it? So, the state of Michigan adopted new laws in '06 about the use of seclusion and restraint in schools. We want to be safe. We want to take care of the students, and we're worried about welfare and security. And we want to use evidence based practices that are going to help the kids out the most. We want to ensure seclusion and restraint is only a last minute result, and the laws defined what exactly seclusion and restraint are, an emergency seclusion restraint, an emergency physical restraint are, and when they should be used. So, who should be trained if you're in a school? Well, the law says key identified personnel. So, who are those? Administrators, social workers, school psychologists, counselors, and if you're a special education teacher, as we talked about in class in our seclusion restraint presentation, you should absolutely be trained. What areas what areas are required for key identified personnel? You want to look at de-escalation, PBIS strategies, identifying triggers of behaviors, person sweating, being uneasy. Each student has different triggers, how to recognize them, the injuries that can happen if you seclude or restrain, information on the policies of the state and how they view seclusion and restraint. So, more training areas. We have environmental factors leading to the use of seclusion and restraint. So, are there things that you can do in your classroom that can help prevent seclusion and restraint from being needed? Identifying what dangerous behavior is. Like a student sitting at his desk, is he dangerous? But is a student now banging on windows, is that dangerous? Risk assessment, kind of like what I said above, which behaviors are dangerous, which behaviors are not. Different types of seclusion and restraint. There's a whole variety. There's physical, there's chemical, mechanical. Effects of seclusion and restraint on the students. Seclusion and restraint doesn't just happen in a window. It just doesn't happen and it's over. Students and staff both are impacted by it, and it's important to understand that. How to monitor safety and distress. Nobody wants anyone getting hurt or even in the worst case scenario dying. That's why we have CPR and first aid training as well. Key personnel should also be trained in these four areas: conflict resolution, mediation, social skills, and positive behavior intervention and supports. These are basic things. If you're a special ed teacher, you generally understand these four categories, but if you're a gen ed teacher or someone who doesn't work with special populations, these are definitely an area of emphasis that all school teachers could use, especially the first three. And with the shift of schools going towards restorative justice, understanding PBIS is so important and can help prevent serious situations from happening. I'm going to skip over this one. As I mentioned before, we want to make sure that seclusion restraint is the last resort. It's safe for the pupil and safety of everyone else. Promotes positive behavior intervention strategies. We want to use best standards and practices. We want to also make sure the student is being treated in a dignified manner and it's safe and it's for the student's well-being. So now we're going to look at prohibition policies and documentation and communication. So these can never be done with the student: corporal punishment, deprivation of basic needs, child abuse, seclusion other than emergency seclusion. The intentional application of a noxious substance or stimulus that results in the pain or extreme discomfort, mechanical restraint or chemical restraint. So for the noxious substance, You got to be really careful in your classroom, like using even your diffusers and things like that, making sure that that can't be misconstrued as a noxious substance. Any restraint that negatively impacts breathing, so that could be a floor restraint, face down, or any position that the student is bent that makes things very difficult for them to breathe. So you got to be very careful in how you choose to deal with your students. So you can't put the student in a seated or kneeling position. Bending them over is not a good spot for the student to be, and you do not want to be lying on the student's back or stomach, or them being on their back or stomach. As mentioned, prone restraint or any other physical restraint other than emergency restraint. Those who don't know what a corporal punishment is, it's any type of physical punishment, spanking or anything like that, and also using things like push-ups or fitness, like when you're a kid in the football field and the coach would tell you to go take a lap. That is a form of corporal punishment. Here's our types of mechanical and prone restraints. I'm just going to skip over this because I've talked about this before. So what is emergency seclusion? It's confinement in a room or other space in which people is physically prevented from leaving. Only intended for the purpose of emergency situations. This does not include lockdown drills or other emergency procedures for pupil safety. So if your intent is to keep the person in that room, you are by definition secluding that student. If that person was to try to leave that room, and if you were to stop them, that would mean you're secluding them. As I mentioned, it restricts student movement. So by not letting them leave the room, you're restricting their movement. Only intended for emergency situation, imminent risks to safety of people or others. So if you have a student who starts trashing your room and you clear out the other students, and that person's not attempting to leave the room, they're not technically secluded, but as soon as they go to leave and go for that door, and you shut that door or you're going to prevent them from leaving, you are now secluding them. You cannot use this as a replacement for least restrictive environments. And here's the exceptions at the bottom. Reasonable physical force is permitted to maintain order, break up a fight or physical assault, to prevent physical harm to others, to protect property, or to obtain possession of weapon or dangerous objects. I had a situation a couple years ago where a student had a weapon and was threatening a secretary, and I had to subdue them a little more roughly than what we are typically trained to. But I was covered because the student had a weapon and he was threatening another person. So it's important to understand your laws in situations so that you can make sure you're safe. Here's some things that are coming up from Michigan Department of Education. I gave some samples and some situations here so people can understand the situations and how the state looks at them. Can never lock a secluded room. And here's my reference page. I want to thank you all for listening and have a great day. I hope this helped you a lot with restraint and seclusion. Have a great day.